Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan. This is amazing construction of some kind of crime here, but when we dig down to the bottom of it and try to find out what the underlying crime is, I don't think that's been discussed enough, or what the supposed underlying crime is. One of the propositions was that hush money should be reported as a campaign finance expense. Okay, if somebody pays their attorney to seal divorce records because they may be going to run for office, or they are running for office, Mr. Traynor, is that a campaign finance expense? Is that something you see on campaign finance reports?
That is not. It is something that you would see. Legal fees are often reported, and it has been the tradition at the commission in looking at those legal fees that we don't question what the attorney-client privilege between the candidates and the lawyer are of what's needed in those particular circumstances.
So let me use another example. In 1999, Bill and Hillary Clinton bought a house in New York, obviously influenced the election of the Senate race there in New York because they moved into the House so that she could run for Senate. Is that a campaign finance expense? Is everything that could influence a campaign finance expense?
Well, under Mr. Bragg's interpretation, it would be, but under normal campaign finance law, it would not be. There are distinct similarities here between the John Edwards prosecution in 2008, where he paid over $1 million to his mistress to keep her quiet, and was prosecuted by the Department of Justice for that, and was ultimately acquitted on one count and had a mistrial on all 5 counts. Because the jury was given a correct charge as to what the federal law was. In this particular case, the jury was given an incorrect jury charge as to what the law is, and they come out with a completely opposite ruling.
I asked my campaign finance treasurer if I could pay my wife $10,000. She's got more dirt on me than anybody else. And then report that as a campaign finance expense. And he's very fastidious. He manages the finances of at least a dozen different campaigns. And he looked at me like I was crazy. Yet, isn't that sort of the same theory that Alvin Bragg had here? That something like that could be reported as a campaign finance expense?
It's very similar to what's happened here.
So, Congress has paid over $17 million in hush money for sexual misconduct inside of the offices in these buildings. And what's more is that was taxpayer money, right? The allegation is that President Trump paid $130,000 of his own money. But here in Congress, there may be some on this dais. I mean, I'm for turning loose all of these records. Who in here has had the taxpayer pay for their sexual misconduct charges the hush money? I bet there's some over there. There may be some over here. I don't know, but I do know it's taxpayer money, and I do know not a single penny of it has been turned in as a campaign finance expense. Is the FEC going to investigate the $17 million that Congress has paid to settle, behind closed doors these sexual misconduct allegations?
Congressman, if a complaint were to come to us about it, I'm sure it would be thoroughly investigated.
I might file one because it seems like anybody could do this. But let me just ask this. Is this verdict going to be vacated? Attorney General Bailey, what do you think?
It absolutely should be.
On what grounds?
Numerous grounds. I think the 5 grounds I laid out in my opening statement provide sufficient justification to undermine the credibility of the conviction. I think there are additional grounds as well. But I think that the constitutional violations, the due process violation, the jury unanimity, Sixth Amendment problem alone, the gag order is violative of the First Amendment. I mean, the prosecutorial misconduct, the conviction is replete with legal error.
Ms. Foley, do you think this is going to be vacated, this verdict?
I do, and I think eventually it's going to be reversed based on legal grounds rather than mixed questions of fact and law. So some of the evidentiary issues, some of the bias issues, I think they're more difficult to win on appeal because the appellate courts owe deference on these evidentiary determinations of trial judges. Bias is very difficult to win on appeal because the judge has so much latitude in deciding whether to recuse himself. That's why the due process errors are so critical here, because obviously due process errors are questions of law. They get de novo standard of appellate review. The appellate courts owe absolutely no deference whatsoever.
So the irony here is this is going to be vacated, And this trial was all about trying to influence an election, using the process as the punishment. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record 3 documents. One is entitled FEC Drops Investigation into Trump Hush Payments. This is from 3 years ago. I'd like to introduce a document. Congress has paid $17 million in sexual misconduct and discrimination settlements. This was in Axios in 2017. And my third and final document I'd like to introduce is from CNN. Congress paid out $17 million in settlements. Here's why we know so little about that money. Thank you. I yield back.